All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. We're just going to give just about a few minutes in order to let people start coming in. And while you're doing that, while you're coming in, I do invite you to put your name and the organization that you're from in the chat so that we can start to see who is joining us today. So we will start in just about 1 minute. Great. Thank you, Jeremy, for kicking us off. Welcome. Welcome. Awesome. Good to see everybody. Just going to give just a little bit more time. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. Again, welcome. Thank you for joining us for this awesome conversation we have today on mentorship and internships, which is a critical intersection for developing the next generation of talent. My name is Megan. I'm the Chief Marketing and Operations Officer here at Mentor Collective, and I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by these amazing leaders from the Business Higher Education Forum, Handshake, and then my own amazing colleague from Mentor Collective. Each of them bring insights on how we can make these opportunities more impactful and future ready. And I'm really excited to get us kicked off. So in order to get started, just a few quick housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded and we will send out a copy of this tomorrow via email. On the screen too, you'll see just a few little tips, kind of general webinar 101, which I'm sure everybody here is familiar with now. But again, everybody's going to be muted, so we encourage you to use the chat feature should you have questions overall. And then, as always, if you're just joining us, we encourage you to put your name and your organization in there just so that we can see the great audience that is joining us today. And as always, it's really important to engage. Please, throughout, again, ask questions. Everybody loves reactions and emojis, so don't hesitate to use those awesome features that are in Zoom as well. So getting us kicked off, I would love to say I'm very excited to introduce this awesome panel that we have here today, a complete powerhouse. And I'm going to give the mic to each of them to give a quick intro to themselves. So I'm going to start with you, Jennifer.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jennifer Thornton, and I'm the Chief Program Officer at the Business Higher Education Forum. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Business Higher Education Forum, we're a national network and we connect pioneering corporate leaders and higher education leaders to identify emerging skills gaps and co-develop pathways to solve for those gaps. We empower and catalyze collaborations that deliver accelerated, inclusive, and effective solutions across education and work. And one of our three priority areas is expanding the adoption and access of work-integrated learning models that inclusively connect and prepare talent. We do a lot of work in that space, and I'm delighted to be on this panel with Annemiek and Kate to share more about this work that I'm really passionate about. So let me turn it over to you, Annemiek.
Hello, everyone. My name is Annemiek Rice. I am here joining us from Mentor Collective, where we get to help many of our wonderful partner institutions and organizations transform outcomes for their learners and workers through mentorship. I am also a huge data geek, a longtime higher education. I like to consider myself still an insider and very excited to help connect the dots between these wonderful colleagues that we have on the line here today. And Kate.
Awesome. Thank you, Annemiek. My name is Kate Urban. I am a staff researcher at Handshake. For those of you who might not be familiar with Handshake, we are the largest career network for Gen Z. So we serve about 1 million employers, more than 18 million college and university students, and more than 1,500 higher education institutions, with the goal of really just connecting early talent with great career opportunities and helping employers find the right early talent for their organizations. So in my role, I work on a very wide range of projects just aimed at better understanding the early talent space. And that includes kind of tapping into our student network to learn about the benefits and the types of support that students are looking for as they launch their careers, which includes things like mentorship. So I am very excited to be joining this conversation and really looking forward to sharing some of our data with you today.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jennifer, Annemiek, and Kate. We are very, very honored to have you today, and look forward to diving in. So, just to set us off, we all know that internships have long been a cornerstone of early career development. They offer students exposure to professional world, a chance to apply their knowledge, a critical foot in the door. But in today's evolving talent landscape, where students are growing uncertainty, rising competition, and varying levels of access, we have to ask the question, are internships enough? So this is where mentorship comes in. When you combine the structure of an internship with the human connection of mentorship, you create something that's really powerful, a launch pad for long-term success. So for our fantastic panel today, we'll actually dive deeper and really discuss how mentorship can amplify the internship programs, whether you're boosting satisfaction, building confidence, delivering real measurable gains, and just overall supporting career readiness. So before we dive into the actual discussion portion, I have two very quick polls to get us started. So going through, first one, we all ultimately have had someone in our life who has made a difference, a mentor who has offered guidance, encouragement, critical nudge at the right moment, whether navigating career decisions or personal milestones. So take a minute. Think about who is your most influential mentor? Who has made that impact? So if you go ahead, just take a minute. There's some options here as we think about it. And then after you fill that out, I encourage you in the chat to write why. Why did you pick that person? What impact did that person have on your life? Again, whether it's a professional milestone, whether it's a personal one, I think it's all important for us to just take a moment to think about that. So go ahead and see, how are our results looking, Jasmine?
Mostly supervisor or manager at work.
Awesome. Great. So it goes to show you the impact that you have within the workspace. Great. So now I'm going to go to one additional poll. So now that we've all had a chance to take a look at how that's impacted us personally, let's think about, do you currently have a mentorship or internship or career readiness program at your institution or organization? So if you could just take a moment to say, and it's multiple choice, you could have multiple, you could have one, but let's just take a look and see where people joining us today ultimately are where they are. So I'm going to pause for 1 second there. All right, Jasmine, how are we looking?
Looks like yes, we have a mentorship program is leading with yes, we have an internship program close behind, tied with yes, we have a career readiness program or programs.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got a great group of individuals that are joining today to figure out how we can even go deeper and what we currently have and continue to prepare our overall learners. So let's start by setting the stage and explore why internships and mentorships together are not just individual strategies, but how combined powerful they are, the complementary tools that help building career-ready talent pipelines. So I'm going to turn it over to Kate to talk to us a little bit about some of the amazing work she's finding at Handshake.
Awesome. Thank you, Meg. So I'm excited just to kick us off by highlighting a few data points from our research at Handshake that I think really help speak to why mentorship matters so much for a great internship experience. So late last year, we were able to survey about 6,000 students on our platform about their internship goals and experiences. And one of our key takeaways was really that students are going into internships with the goal of laying a long-term foundation for their careers. So we found that about 87% of students said they were pursuing an internship in order to build skills that would be valuable for their future career. 72% said they were hoping that an internship experience would actually help them kind of figure out what type of job or career they wanted to pursue. And then about 70% said that they were pursuing an internship to make professional connections. And these are all things I think that, we probably all know a great mentor could really help with. So a mentor can be a skills coach and a source of consistent advice and really accessible feedback. They can be someone who helps to illuminate different career paths within an organization and who helps an intern get exposure to people in different roles or just talks to them and brainstorms about, what their future career might look like. And they can be that first real professional connection, someone who a student stays in touch with after their internship as they progress in their career journey, who they come back to for networking support and advice. So as we dive into this discussion and we get more into the details of what mentorship looks like as part of the internship experience, I think it's just really helpful to keep this high level picture in mind. We can really see from this research that when a student comes in as an intern, that is a perfect moment to get them connected to a mentor and start building that relationship. And with that, I think, hand it to Jennifer to talk a little bit about what you are seeing at Business Higher Education Forum.
Great. Thanks, Kate. So last year, the Business Higher Education Forum completed a research report that I'm going to put in the chat for you on expanding internships, and it's all focused on employer insights. And for those of you who have looked at the literature, pretty much everything focuses on the learner or the higher education perspective. So we really wanted to know what are employers thinking about internships so that we can expand the number that are offered. One of the areas when we looked at from their perspective, and we interviewed 2,700 employers and conducted about 30 interviews, when they told us what they look for in a recent grad's work history that's important for hiring, say the second highest was can articulate the impact made during work experiences. And, this is an area where a mentor can be really helpful. It's an area where many learners struggle to say, here's what I learned, here's how it's relevant, and that a mentor can be exceptionally helpful. And if you could go to the next slide. Wanted to also share that even though there's strong demand, as all of you running internship programs know, the supply is limited. We do offer recommendations in our report, but we know it's can be challenging to grow the number that are offered. And so about 4.6 million learners who wanted an internship did not get one. But then you also see there's a pretty big delta between the number who completed an internship and those who completed a higher quality internship. And for the higher quality internship, one of the items we look for is having a mentorship component within that. So kind of two things. One is, right, we need to grow it, but what we really want to do is how do we grow internships that have quality, have mentorship experiences embedded. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Annemiek.
And this is where some of those additional findings that Kate and her team delivered in the handshake report really resonated, as seeing that level of support and mentorship affected not only the outcomes, but the interest in folks working for a certain employer or working in a certain industry. And that mentorship can also impact the employer's outcomes from internships in addition to the student's outcomes. So we know that internships are very powerful, but we need to know that to get those high quality internships, there's structure, there's reflection, there's guidance, and this is where that mentorship can turn into a transformational impact. Because of how limited they are, how expensive they are, the call is really we need to get every ounce of value out of these experiences for the students who are fortunate enough to land them. And what we know about the impact, if you can go to the next slide, Meg, of the two of these together, obviously Handshake has shared the connection between satisfaction and career preparedness, which is echoed in many other studies, but also that this is disproportionately true for underrepresented students or those who have greater leaps to make in their postgraduate plans. And so we see a real opportunity here to amplify the impact of internships for students who come into those experiences potentially less exposed with less social capital and so forth. And then also there's this element of accountability, skill development, and importantly, relationships that can extend beyond the official course of the internship start and end date. So we'll talk more about all of these, but these are some of the really key elements when we put these two high impact practices together.
Awesome. Thank you guys for helping set the stage. And so now I want to turn it over to you, Jennifer, to guide us through today's discussion. So I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Meg. So excited to dive in with Kate and Annemiek here. Overall, the kind of topics we'll cover are, the link between mentorship and intern satisfaction, what interns value, what makes for a good internship or mentorship experience, and then lasting advantages for your organization. So love to start here with the big picture. How do you see mentorship influencing intern satisfaction and their sense of career preparedness? Kate, I believe you have lots of research on this, so can we start with you?
Awesome. Yes, we do have some and highlighted some of it on with that earlier slide, but I will voice it over just in a little more detail for folks. So we asked about a number of factors when we surveyed students that might impact an intern satisfaction with their experience. And we did find that mentorship is a really big deal. So about 60% of the students that responded to that survey told us that the level of mentorship they received had a major impact on their level of interest in working full time for the employer that they interned with. And almost 100% said mentorship or lack thereof had at least some impact in their interest on a full time role. So we can definitely see that this is something, if students have a mentor who they connect with, they just have a much better impression of the organization overall and have a much easier time kind of picturing themselves having a good, start to their career there or being a full-time employee there. The other thing I'll just mention from our data is, I think mentors can play a really important role in helping interns and early career employees who are maybe navigating a professional workplace for the first time. So we ran another survey earlier this year in which we asked about kind of different aspects of career preparedness. And one thing we found was that actually less than 30% of college seniors said that they feel fully confident that they know how to reach out for support at work. And I think that's one place where, having a mentor can really help bridge that gap as someone who is specifically there to support you, who you've had help establishing a relationship with. They're not your manager. They can feel like a safe and reliable resource, someone you can go to kind of ask those stupid questions. And we know there are no stupid questions, but it can often feel that way. So I think that can be, just a really important aspect of that experience as an intern, as you're getting kind of acclimatized to being in a professional setting.
Great. Annemiek, I'm sure you have some to add to what Kate shared.
I think two elements of this that really stand out to me is that mentors need to be an intentional but not evaluative relationship. And so while managers might sometimes also become mentors or might long term stay in that role, uh, interns, learners do need access to someone, as Kate said, where they can make mistakes, fumble, or have someone help them when that fumbling happens. These students are exploring and practicing at the same time as they are performing, and that requires a few different types of safety nets. And the mentor should be one where they are not judging or evaluating the student's performance in real time. The second thing I want to say here is that sense of belonging is really key to feeling safe in a workplace, to feeling the confidence that they need in an environment that they are less experienced in. And we know that mentorship is incredibly powerful in helping that learner feel like they belong. And the relevance of that match between the learner and the mentor is really important to create that sense of belonging. It's not positional, it's not role-based, it's lived experience. And so that belonging can really be an underpinning of performance and outcomes and satisfaction. And we want to secure that right at the start.
Wow, that's really informative. I'm wondering on, I feel like I heard some areas here, but from the employer perspective, is there a return on investment for providing mentorship? When we're asking employers to do things, right? That's always a helpful thing to show. Anything you can add on their perspective?
Absolutely. I can jump in here quickly. I think there is a very clear bottom line in terms of just being able to convert your best interns into full-time employees. As I mentioned previously, mentorship we're seeing as something that has a really big impact on the intern's overall impression of the organization. Interns who are getting effective mentorship, who feel like they had a real connection with a mentor, are much more likely to be interested in a full-time role with that employer. I will share another kind of interesting nugget here is that we also see a very strong correlation between interns actually staying in touch with their mentor after the internship and being more likely to consider a full-time role. So I think that just speaks to, the more that an employer can invest in cultivating those relationships, setting interns up, like Anmik said, with people who they relate to, where there can be a real long-term connection, that is definitely going to pay dividends in terms of those high-performing interns wanting to come back full-time.
And I'll add that the benefit is not just to the mentees here. So the employer also benefits with the maybe very nearly recently hired employees who are serving as mentors. If you go with the model of early stage employees mentoring interns as opposed to senior leaders, right? That is associated with loyalty, engagement, and lots of other employee engagement metrics. So we're getting multiple outcomes with that same fruitful relationship, and also the exponential connections between them. Each of these relationships opens up more relationships, and so you start to see that exponential effect within the organization. I refer you to my colleague who has a graphic design background, even though I don't, and then we get a tighter and tighter connection.
Great. And I love that around around the mentor being more engaged in their in their office, in their work environment. We know employers are increasingly struggling with that. So what a great way by giving back and having a mentee. So back to the mentee side. So when we talk about mentorship today, what do interns and students like? What do they want? What does good mentorship look like from their point of view? And then how could structure help build accountability and support real skill development? Kate, did your research cover this?
Yeah, so I can speak to kind of the first piece of that. One of the most interesting things we've seen in our research, and I think we've alluded to this a little bit, is that students don't actually want a senior leader as a mentor necessarily, or at least that's not something they're prioritizing, which I think is just a really important thing for organizations to note, because I think there's often pushback around, oh, our senior leaders are very busy, they're in very high demand, they don't necessarily have time to be mentoring interns or new grads. But that's actually not what students are looking for. When we ask them what is important to them in a mentor, the top responses were someone who has expertise in my field. So someone who I can learn from, who is maybe a step or two ahead of me in terms of their skill level, someone who shares my values, and then someone I can relate to. So I think, looking at all of those things together, the best mentor might be someone who is much closer to the intern in terms of their age and their stage in their career. It might be important that they share certain elements of their background, challenges they've overcome, other interests outside of work. And that person is going to be, just more relatable and approachable and much easier for the intern to build a trusting relationship with, maybe than someone who is very, very senior.
Great. Annemiek, what would you add?
I think that's really the most important thing. And then the mentor's ability to open doors for that student, right? So it doesn't always have to be the mentor themselves that makes the introduction, or open, but is willing to share their social capital, is willing to open a door, make an introduction, vouch for that learner in some way, whether that's internally in the organization or externally. But again, that second piece is really only valuable if we've nailed the first.
Got it. So, I'd love to dive in a little more about what makes for a good mentorship experience. So, Annemiek, what kinds of goals are mentees trying to accomplish through mentorship, and like what makes the experience really work?
I mean, career exploration is obviously very key here. And I think this also depends on the student. Some are in internships to figure out what they want to do, and some have crystallized that goal and are trying to prove themselves. And so, a really important element of mentorship success is individualized goals, not assuming that we know what each of these learners is looking out for, but meeting them where they are. And so, the best mentorship conversations start with the mentee talking about their goals and the mentor adapting to them. And that's why even in our systems, the very first questions we ask are, tell us about yourself and what are you trying to accomplish right now? And that's going to evolve over time. They might start by saying, I want to build skills, and then realize a month into the internship that they actually want to pivot career-wise and start needing to explore other areas. So I think the most fruitful mentorship is evolving and constantly reconnecting on what are your goals? Where are you at? Where do we want to go next? And giving that reflection element as well. But you know that they're trying to build confidence, they're building their professional identity, they want feedback, they're navigating the culture, and they're really trying to make progress in a meaningful way, in a transferable way on their career outcomes.
Right, so it's not like a set, you must do this. It's much more of a, okay, this is what you need, and how do I ensure that I'm able to adapt that for you? So that's fantastic. Um, anything around how mentors benefit from the mentorship experience in terms of professional growth or institutional value? I know we touched on that a little earlier, so there might not be anything else, but if you have something, we'd love to hear it.
We hear so much about obviously the engagement element that I mentioned. Um, the benefits for mentors or the motivators are often that I want to give back. I want to be there in a way that either I had or did not receive, right? There's these polar opposite motivations of I had a mentor and I'm compelled to offer it, or I wish I had had one and I want to avoid someone else having that experience. Um, but really, this sometimes becoming a mentor can be the first stage in someone's leadership development in practicing coaching, providing feedback, and build a track for people management or team leadership. So this is in organizations that are trying to build a management or leadership pipeline. This is a wonderful opportunity to tap your aspiring or promising folks. That being said, we say all the time, like mentors should not be perfect. They should have their own hiccups along the way and be kind of whole people with their own weaknesses, self-awareness of these, etc., so that mentees are not intimidated by a concept that a mentor is the top performer or the best at everything and not something they can aspire to. Um, and the other element that I think that the mentor benefits from is learning from the mentee. Many of these mentees are in courses with cutting edge skill and knowledge acquisition that mentors may not have benefited from themselves. AI is a great example of this, like how are folks that have been in the field for 5 or 6 years staying up to date on the latest methodologies. Maybe there are elements of generational differences that will help make us better in our workplace by being more in tune with this next generation. And I shouldn't assume that mentees are of a certain age either. So there are definitely every mentor testimonial we look at includes how much I learned from my mentee.
I love that. That's fantastic. So great. So organizational impacts, what actionable strategies for really seamlessly integrating mentorship into your internship programs do you recommend? So I'd love to hear about this both from a higher education perspective and then also from an employer perspective. How do you build those in? Kate, do we want to start with you?
Yeah, I can start with just a couple of thoughts. I mean, I think from an employer perspective, one of the first pieces of advice I would give is tap your early talent as mentors. Like I said, I think there's often a tendency to jump straight to a mentor has to be someone very senior. And I think actually, developing a program or a formal system for pairing up interns or brand new grads with someone who's been in the workforce a couple of years is just a win-win-win. I think that the mentor gets great experience, the intern gets someone to guide them, the company gets benefits in terms of hiring and retention. So that's kind of the first thing that I would say. I want to let Anami, jump in on the higher ed piece because I think you have a little more experience there, although I do have some more uninformed thoughts.
For sure. We have done a wonderful kind of environmental scan of all of our partners and surfaces up in our culture of mentorship schematic, which really talks through the 6 key things that you want to constantly be improving on to drive the best possible mentorship outcomes. And I want to highlight one of my favorites right now, which is celebration. It is very important for us to recognize and provide airtime to that process. So in the case of an institution that is partnering with an employer that really is building a fruitful relationship with that employer, where there is an appreciation for the mentors that are providing their time and energy to the mentees. And a lot of our institutions do a really great job with this in building brand connections, or, really ensuring that we have that like continuous mentor loop as well. And also in both cases, for whether you're coming at this from a higher education or an employer perspective, really intentional identity conscious matching between participants. The industry or subject of study is valuable, but not enough to build the next level relationship that we want to take place here. So, and in that, I think it's very important to let each individual decide what part of their identity is most relevant to them. We want to ideally not assume that, for instance, your gender is more salient than your status as a veteran, or that your age is more important than the fact that you are also a parent. That individual is going to be the best one to tell you what they're looking for in a mentor. And so we want to give them that agency.
Great. And then Kate, was there anything else on the higher ed side you wanted to add, or did Enemy cover it all?
I think Enemy covered it very well.
Yes, I did too. Perfect. So one thing, and many of us, like BHEF, my organization, we are in a remote environment. I'm wondering, are there any differences, and you would recommend in terms of structure for like remote or hybrid versus in person?
I have been, so I have worked remotely for many years, actually. So I do
Mhm.
have some experience with this, and I would just say, I think mentorship it should always be intentional, and have some structure around it. I think in a remote environment in particular, it must be intentional, because there are fewer opportunities for a student or an intern to just kind of bump into someone in the hall who ends up being kind of the right mentor for them. So I think everything that Annemiek just talked about in terms of intentionally matching interns with mentors, having some kind of guidance for the mentor around how often are you going to meet with this person, what types of questions are you going to ask, how are you going to break the ice. Ideally, having maybe a little bit of a budget for them to make it fun. I can order you a coffee. We can kind of do a little bit of a remote bonding arrangement, that I think is always great. But yeah, I think just in that remote environment, I think this is true for everything with remote work, but just making sure that, it's kind of intentionally set up, because I think it can be a really, really rich relationship still. I don't think anything is lost in those mentor interactions when you're remote. But I do think, it doesn't happen accidentally, as it occasionally can in an in-person setting.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. Annemiek, anything else from your experience?
I think one of the things we've found over and over again is that some form of asynchronous or digital connection can really lower the risk or barrier for starting any relationship. It really reduces things like, I don't have time to stay for dinner after work because I have to get home and do daycare pickup, which am I speaking from experience? 100%. I still want to help someone. I still want to be available to them, but that might be a little bit easier for me to do in Slack or over text, or and so we want to make it so that the mentors are able to say yes to this ask without it being a very large, kind of schedule burden for them, and to keep that connection going. And the same thing for students, that they it's not an intimidating, first step. And so I think the structure that Kate talked about is really helpful. The group events, can really help also for the mentee to mentee and mentor to mentor connections that folks who do this always talk about. And I think another element of the in-person is, again, like who do they need to meet that they would not have run into because you're on floor 6 and someone else is on floor 2. Or again, if you're coming from a background, let's say you identify as neurodivergent, and that's not an easy thing to find in an organization, that it's easier for you to find that person through this experience.
Okay, great. I love, a couple things that you both said, the being able to connect asynchronously, right? Because sometimes it's hard to reach out when you want to reach out and you don't want to inconvenience somebody. So being able to do that. And then, yeah, the intentionality, because, coffee, you're not just going to go walk down for coffee, but yes, you can, with $5, you can get a Starbucks gift card. So that sounds fantastic. Just, I guess, one more follow-up question. When mentorship is done well, anything you want to add about kind of the long-term value for everyone involved? I know you've talked about intern conversion into full-time employment. Anything else on the either institutional outcomes or on early talent outcomes that you wanted to add?
I think one that I see in so many of the folks who are doing this well is the brand and pride and affinity element that comes from being an organization that offers and provides mentorship. I see this like in your membership, Jennifer, in the Boston Higher Education Forum folks, or Business Higher Education Forum folks, and I see it in our institutional partners and the pride and brand elements. And also on the higher education side, this can be a differentiator to an academic program. It can be the thing that students talk about in admissions. I was given a mentor. I was able to help navigate my experience and my translation. When I went and got that internship, it can make the internship really compelling to the student. And that is not why we do it necessarily, but it is a really relevant outcome. And then again, that fresh perspective that permeates the organization when more people are interacting with the interns instead of just the person responsible for overseeing the interns, right? There are more folks in the organization who will be inspired by, influenced by, et cetera. The future of talent, which whether you are in a hiring position right now or not, we all need to be in tune with the future of talent.
I would absolutely second the brand point. I know we have employers who we work with at Handshake who are known for great internship programs, great mentorship as part of the internship program, and that always comes up with students. I was going to mention, if I had one piece of advice for students, it would probably be if you're interviewing for an internship or your first job, ask about this. Ask if the employer has a mentorship program, ask like what opportunities are there for me to mentor others, because I think it's something that just really hooks students, knowing that they're going to have both someone when they start who they can go to, and who can be there as a support for them, but then I think also knowing that that opportunity could be available to them in the future as a stepping stone to leadership and management, as a way to learn, as a way to give back. Yeah, and also the point around just kind of like fresh perspective in the organization. I think that mentors can really become a channel for kind of that informal feedback in a setting where it feels safe, where early talent and intern, like as an intern, you might not speak up at the all team meeting where the whole C-suite is there. That might feel really intimidating, but I definitely have had people who I've mentored who have come to me and said, "Hey, like I noticed this thing just isn't really working or doesn't seem quite right." And it's something that as an employee who's been at the organization for 2 or 3 years, I've just taken for granted, and then I'll say, "Oh, wow, you are absolutely right. That could be done much better." And that can be something that I take to my manager and gets kind of passed up the chain, and becomes a really valuable contribution. So I think the more of that we can get, kind of through these channels where it feels safe to give that feedback, the better off everyone is.
And I just want to add to that because how many of our employers are saying, how can we get more career ready students, right? How can we get more early career ready? What is the missing thing? What is the thing I can offer? And the institutions are saying the same thing. We know there's this gap. How do we fill it?
Mhm.
Why not, as an institution, tap into the mentors for to that point of like more authentic insights will
Mhm.
come not through hierarchical evaluative channels. And so we ask the students, and we probably ask the person who runs the internship program or the person who's the hiring manager, but what do these mentors, how can an organization, or company say to all the mentors, what should we do differently next year?
Mhm.
What should we look for in our hiring round? How could we better support these early career professionals in their growth and development? And are we getting feedback that way?
Right. In terms of like organizational recognition, we are an intern we had a few years ago. She's now we hired her as an associate, and she's now a manager. And I love it when, we work with some really large businesses and they're like, "Oh, she's so fantastic," and she's embarrassed, and I'm like, "Yay, we found her as an like it gives me so much pride that she's in a position that she can be presenting, to businesses around the country on labor market data because that's her area of expertise. And it always makes me very proud. And yes, I love it. So we're going to close with a lightning round here. So for everybody in the audience, if everybody here was to do one thing based on what they heard today, what would you put at the top of your list as a must do for employers and a must do for higher education institutions to seamlessly integrate mentorship into their internship program? So, kind of one top and hopefully maybe easier thing to do.
Was that for us or for the audience?
No, no, that's for you too. Sorry, Kate. And
Oh, okay.
this is sorry for that confusion. This is your lightning round. So if you like one big takeaway for them to have to do, and then we'll have some opportunity for audience Q&A.
Perfect. I would say, I think we mentioned both of these things, but for
Yeah,
employers, I would say offer early talent opportunities to mentor. I think that could start very small. Um, and for higher ed, I would say recognize the employers that you work with who are doing this well.
I will add a +1 to both of Kate's here. If you are starting a mentorship program as an employer, make sure it's not positional and that you train your mentors so they understand their role as a coach and not an evaluator, as well. And then for higher education, alumni are a really untapped network. So many of you may be saying, how do I convince my um, the organizations that my students are employed at to do this, maybe I can't. You can still potentially provide mentors to your interns that are not in that organization or to your students. And so your alumni are raising their hands. Your alumni offices want you to engage your alumni. This is a wonderful, large, very powerful group to be part of the process.
fantastic. And then I'm going to weigh in on this, but if there's what would you recommend learners themselves could do if there's no formal mentorship program? I know you said something about that, Kate, but I would say in our internship study, we saw employers were incredibly receptive to direct outreach from a learner who wanted to intern. That one really surprised me that they were very open to calls and seeing what they could do if a student just did direct outreach to them. And so I would say the same for mentorship, asking their company, asking somebody, that would be a really good opportunity. Anything else that you all would add for a student?
I would say, and I don't think this is my original idea. I don't remember where I got it from, but I would say find something that you are working on, that you feel like you could use help with, or that you would like support on, and ask around for someone in the organization who is very, very good at that thing. And go and ask them specifically for help with that thing, or for their perspective on your work. And that very often will evolve organically into a mentorship relationship. People love to be approached about the thing that they're an expert in or about the thing that they're passionate about. So I think if you come to someone and say, hey, I'm working on this thing that I've heard is right in your wheelhouse. Can you give me some feedback? Can you give me some coaching? That can often be the best way to strike up a mentorship relationship when there isn't a formal program.
Yeah, I think that stereotypical, like, go to an important person and ask them to be your mentor, doesn't result in that close
Yeah.
shared, you need something in common to start. And I think that Kate's example of have a specific ask is great. And really being curious, like, just ask as many questions as you can of the people around you until you find something, as strange as it might be, to create a connection.
Mhm.
It could be where someone grew up. It could be how they started in the organization. So just curiosity is your friend if you're
Mhm.
looking for mentorship.
Yeah, and I will amend that actually and say I think that's such a good point, and it doesn't have to be the thing that you asked for support with or perspective on doesn't necessarily have to be a specific work task. It could be going to someone in the organization and saying, I've noticed that you have done a really good job of balancing your career and parenthood. And that's something that I'm worried about as I'm starting my career and thinking about starting a family. And I would love to talk to you about that. It could be something more personal about how they've navigated their journey and something that you admire about them, that you're hoping to emulate. And then that can be a great way to strike up that conversation.
Fantastic. I saw some little hearts floating up on that one. So with that, this will uh, close this portion. Thank you both so much. I learned so much and would assume the audience did as well. So thank you. And I'll turn it to you, Meg.
Awesome. Yes, I just want to plus one that such a thoughtful and very action-oriented discussion. So very grateful for all of the kind of takeaways. Been monitoring the chat. I want to just use this as an opportunity. If you have any questions for our amazing panelist, please feel free to put that into a chat. I think while we take a minute to do that, I would love to just open it up. I know you, Jennifer, the Business Higher Education Forum, does a ton of research and engagement across both, employers and education. Anything upcoming that you want to highlight or releases that you've just had that you want to share with the group? I think the paper or the research that you shared earlier.
Yeah, we shared our research last year on the internships and really the employer perspective of that. And say that's a really good resource. We've been sharing some short pieces in follow-up to that as well. One other item that could be really helpful is a report on forging partnerships. So it is around what are businesses looking for in partnerships, what's important to them, what is higher ed, what's important to them, and how to create partnerships. So I'd encourage you all to take a look at this. And then we have also a new listserv, and we send out a newsletter with both what kind of our releases and new releases. And so Carrie, my colleague Carrie is here. Thank you. And Carrie, if you know how to tell anybody to get on our newsletter, that would be great. We've just started it and we're getting a lot of really nice feedback.
That's great. Awesome. Yes, please, Carrie, if you have the opportunity. Otherwise, we can include that in the follow-up too.
Perfect.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. And Kate, anything on the handshake side that you want to shout out about?
Sure. I will drop a link in the chat to our general research page for our Handshake Network Trends program, which is where we publish the internships survey that I mentioned. A couple of times a year, we do a pretty comprehensive survey of the graduating class, so of college seniors, about kind of what they're prioritizing in their career, their sentiment about the job market, their feelings about their preparedness for the workforce. So we just recently published our final report on the class of 2025. So that is something to check out as well.
Cool. Great. Awesome. Annemiek, anything on the Mentor Collective side that you're really excited to highlight?
Yes, we are digging into some updated data on career self-efficacy and professional skill development of students that we are sharing with folks in a webinar on July 9th. Also with a wonderful guest speaker, Dr. James Winfield from Southern New Hampshire, talking a lot about how different student populations absorb and learn and prepare for life after graduation.
Awesome. All right. Well, wow. What an incredible session. I really just want to say a huge thank you to all three of you. So Jennifer, Kate, Annemiek, sharing your insights, experiences, and to everyone who joined us today. You know, this conversation is an important one. It really highlights the powerful synergy between mentorship and internship, and together really allows us to help create effective pathways to student success and career readiness overall. So just again, following up, we will share the recording via email tomorrow to those who attend. And just as we're closing, I want to do one final poll that really just helps gauge interest overall. So I think, you know, we hope that you leave today inspired with new ideas to strengthen your own programs and partnerships, and that collaboratively we can make a broader impact. So I just want to say thank you again, and that's it for today's webinar. Take care, everybody.